I'm Rashad Robinson, and I'm the president of Color of Change. And I'm so excited to be here for this conversation. We're here to talk about big tech and its role in our lives, its role in shaping misinformation and disinformation. In the wake of the insurrection at the Capitol a few weeks ago, our conversations today are even more relevant. We're examining how Facebook's actions, or the lack of actions, contributed to the violent events that we saw, and the role of social media as a whole. I am here joined by someone who knows these issues intimately and knows big tech intimately. Mark Luckie, a former employee of Facebook who bravely spoke out about the inequities and the challenges and the racial injustice happening at this corporation. Mark is here for a conversation about what's happening in big tech and about some of the things that we need to be looking at and doing as we move forward. I'd love for you, Mark, to just talk to us a little bit about Ground Us and your role at Facebook. What were you doing? How long did you work there at the company? And then, we can kind of move from there.
Sure. Great to be with you. Thank you for having me. So I had an official title at Facebook, Strategic Partner Manager for Global Influencers. Secretly, my role was to expand diverse partnerships. So upon coming to Facebook, the celebrities, the talent, the big names that everyone sort of knows that Facebook worked with in official capacities was very, whatever the opposite of diverse is, undiverse. And so I was brought in to make sure that the resources, the opportunities, were being distributed to underrepresented communities, underrepresented talent influencers, somewhere who were as successful, if not more successful, than some of the groups that Facebook was working with. And at the same time, really trying to promote internal diversity, using my megaphone as someone who had access to these resources to create partnerships between internal and external parties. Yes.
So, for years, groups like mine, Color of Change, and others have been in conversations with Facebook leadership about the dangers of white nationalists organizing and the incitement of violence on their platform. We know that employees, including you, have also raised a wide range of concerns about how the company fails to protect Black users and employees. Can you say a little bit more about the concerns that you raised and the reaction you got from the leadership at Facebook?
Yes, it was me and a bunch of people across the company who were saying, "Hey, there's inequity that's happening on the platform." A lot of times in tech, they see users as one big homogenous group that they develop products for, and not understanding that that product is being affecting these groups dissimilarly. And so, for Black users, who time and time again was proven internally that are over index in the amount of engagement, meaning they spend 2 to 3 times more engagement, more times on the platform, they watch more video, like all the metrics that you can think of, Black users and to a certain extent Hispanic users were doing on the platform, and yet they were not getting the attention. They were having their accounts being taken down regularly. They were having accounts be suspended for speaking up about Black Lives Matter, just refuting race and bigots and racists who were in their feeds. And essentially the platform was being weaponized against them. The platform that's supposed to be for everybody and to connect the world was only being connected for some. And that was a real tragedy. Lots of people reaching out to every level of the company that they could to get interest in changing it. But Facebook had its priorities, and Black users were not one of them. And Black employees, by extension, had to struggle as well.
So why do you think they didn't do anything? Like, you just listed out the numbers, you listed out the problem. All of that was really clear. There were outside folks highlighting the problem. There are folks on the inside highlighting the problem. Why wasn't the problem dealt with? What was the sort of barrier?
The barrier was the top level executives. It takes someone deeply in charge to say, okay, we're going to allocate resources to this. And we saw the complete opposite, where studies were shut down, resources were taken away. People who were working on these projects or doing independent research were being penalized in their reviews. Some people feeling the pressure to absolutely leave. And so that was happening on a mid-managerial level all the way up to executives. And it's not exactly clear why this was happening, but from my perspective, it's all about priorities. If this isn't a problem that you see affects you, then you're less likely to prioritize it. But Black people, we are strong, we are resilient, and we're not afraid to make our voices heard. And that's what's happening now and will continue to happen.
So, as we sort of see the fact that, Facebook knew, you're saying it was not a priority. What do you think are the things that need to happen to start making it a priority? I'm always interested in, how do we now that we've got all this visibility around the problem, right? We saw the insurrection in DC. We saw all of the ways in which things that the company ignored sort of came to light. And now, we saw the statements from the company almost gaslighting us in some ways about things that we knew and whether or not these were related to their platform. And then banning Trump, right? His account for some time, which they had refused to do for so long. Both in terms of what do you think that we need sort of government action and accountability? Do you think there are things that need to change the leadership level? And in terms of, in your view, as it relates to both the user's experience and the employee's experience, if there are specific things that you think need to be done, I'd love for you just to riff on that for a second.
Yes, I think what's most notable is that Facebook is in the business of gaslighting. It gaslights color of change. It gaslights civil rights organizations. It gaslights governments, including the U.S. government. It tells politicians what they need to hear so that they go away and don't apply the pressure that they probably should. They prey on the ignorance of people outside of the company, because if you don't know how Facebook truly works, if you don't know how these missteps are happening, then it's really hard to hold them accountable. And they're really banking on that. And the second thing that they're banking on is that you forget that the news cycle passes and people stop paying attention to the shortcomings that they have. But the thing about Silicon Valley and Facebook in particular is that there will always be a scandal. For whatever reason, there will always be a scandal at Facebook. And so there are plenty of reasons to continue to pursue justice within Facebook. I think if Facebook dedicated the same energy to racial justice issues that it does to things like Cambridge Analytica and to breaches and things that have an effect on their bottom line, which they fail to realize that racism and white supremacy on the platform does affect their bottom line, then we'd see some real change here. But one of the tactics that I've used in my history of working in Silicon Valley is to underscore to executives, here is where your money is being messed up. If you allow Black users to, or if you permit Black users to be discriminated on the platform, then you're going to lose them. And these are, as I've said, very valuable, very engaged group of people. And so it really is empowering the people who are doing the work rather than discouraging them internally to stop putting out blank statements and hoping the press and the people who have their attention on Facebook, hoping that they go away. Because the honest truth is that social media networks come and go. I think back to Friendster and MySpace, and yes, Facebook has over 2 billion users across its family of platforms, yes, but it's not too big to fail. And right now that they are setting themselves up to fail, and it's really just going to take one inciting incident to make that go away.
Facebook recently hired Roy Austin Jr. as its first vice president of civil rights. I'm interested, uh, if his goal is to get measurable impact, both on internal operations and culture, as well as the external sort of facing products, as someone who was there, right? If it was just you and Mr. Austin, in a room and you're like, I want to give you the sort of real scoop. This is what you need to know going in. And these are the things that you need to focus on in order to be successful. Maybe here are some of the barriers that you're going to face. What would you say to Mr. Austin, sort of as he takes on this endeavor of trying to bring civil rights inside of an organization which has fought civil rights tooth and nail?
Well, I first leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and asked him, "Are you for real? Are you serious? Do you actually have an effect on how Facebook is going to change?" Because I remember even when the civil rights audit was being announced, a lot of the Black employees were like, nothing's going to happen from this. Facebook has had a head of diversity who has been, for the most part, ineffectual for the longest time. We've seen the diversity numbers not go up at all. We haven't seen change, real change happen from Facebook. And what we have seen a history of is that Facebook throws money or positions at causes that it has itself incited. We've seen this with the Facebook Journalism Project. We've seen it making donations, including trying to make donations to civil rights organizations that are opposing it. And thankfully, there's been pushback on that. But my goal would be to ask him, what are the actionable steps? And most importantly, what does the finish line look like? How are you holding executives accountable? Because we all know what Facebook needs to do. It's not some big mystery. It's all been outlined by its critics, the people watching it. The goal of this new install should be to have a direct line to executives to be able to make change happen. I'm pessimistic just because this is the nature of the game, even though I'm naturally an optimist. So a part of me will hold on to that optimism, I suppose.
There are so many questions, right, about what's happening for employees. I think you famously said when you were sort of announcing your exit that Facebook had more Black Lives Matter signs than Black people. I remember that line. It was like excellent, and it like made it so very clear, sort of the challenge. And I remember a number of years ago speaking at a Black History Month event at Facebook's campus out in California, and wondering why the Black people didn't show up, and being told, well, the Black people did show up. We're here.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so, working at this company apparently is a thing that people would want to do, right? A lot of people know Facebook. Facebook is a very public company. And like a lot of Silicon Valley companies, they've really struggled with the numbers. They've struggled with being able to um, actually have numbers that meet the communities that they serve. I'm just interested if you can say a little bit more about sort of what employees like you and other sort of Black employees bring to the room, how your voice and how your experience and how your expertise could have been leveraged or could be leveraged as Facebook is dealing with the challenge it's facing.
I think the best part of being a Black employee at Facebook is that we often have to, as the saying goes, work twice as hard to get there. There are so many systems set up along the way to exclude us from being there. And so to actually have your foot in the door means that you are an extraordinary person, whether Facebook recognizes that or not. We also tend to have outsider experience. A lot of times the Black employees were coming from companies that weren't Google and Twitter, Microsoft, Yahoo. And so they had a varied experience from people who had worked in these roles for a very long time within the Silicon Valley construct. And so whenever Black employees, for the most part, were together, we recognized that magic in each other. We knew that we had extra hurdles to climb, and that made us more resilient to be there. To be Black at Facebook is an act of politics. It's an act of struggle, just because you know that you have to continue to work twice as hard, that the microscope is on you. And so whether you intend to stand up in the struggle, raise your fist and pick out your afro or not, you are being judged as a Black person because you just don't look like everyone who's there. And to your point, I'll add, because I had these celebrities, big name talent, escorting them into Facebook grounds, working with them, having them speak. The number one question I always got is like, where are all the Black people? And I had to explain, they're here. They're just not in this particular building. Well, which building? A building. They are here though.
Yeah. You know, that's a great segue because, you know, you're not at Facebook anymore, but part of your role was to engage folks that have cultural power, folks that have visibility, folks that the organization is going to want to be connected to. If someone who is a influencer is watching this, not just as it relates to Facebook, but Silicon Valley companies or other corporations in general, what are the things that influencers should be thinking about or asking as they are partnering with brands that could be helpful to the employees that work there, that could be helpful to the external facing products? What are some of the things that these folks should be asking of those companies as they're partnering to make sure that they're putting front and center demands that the company may not be hearing, or maybe that they're ignoring from folks that they see as less powerful?
Well, I think influencers should know, first of all, that they're being systematically excluded on a grand scale, that Black influencers are not shown the same level of attention as people influence who look like the people who are on these teams. And that's from a mere lack of cultural understanding. One of my goals while I was there is to, hey, you work with Taylor Swift, but what about Daddy Yankee? What about Maluma? What about, are we working with these artists, these influencers, these talents? I was going through spreadsheets to figure out, who is the influencer with 1 million followers and really trying to bring them in the fold. One of the things that I behind the scenes worked on was verification, and that was a gesture of goodwill from me to people who had been long silenced or ignored by Facebook, and they were just happy to be able to talk to somebody within Facebook, which continues to be a problem, is that influencers, talent of color, does not have the same access. And again, this is because of a lack of cultural understanding. And I can think of tons of examples, but bound to an NDA that I can't share exactly what that is. But the way to succeed is to do what Black people have done for the longest, which is to build our own thing on these platforms. To say, we're not going to wait on you to tell us what we should do. We're not going to wait for you to do product demos or to invite us to your events or to do product launches. We're going to take the tool that you have created and we're going to use it and excel beyond your wildest imaginations. And I think some of the failures actually in Facebook's products have come from not embedding with African-American influencers and talent, that they chase the influencers that everyone is chasing after. Meanwhile, Black people take these platforms and they flourish. And so that's just how Black people have had to operate for decades. And unfortunately, that struggle continues.
So, there's the road forward, right? So much attention has been paid to Facebook, from the Stop Hate for Profit boycott, which Color of Change was very much a part of, along with groups like the NAACP, Free Press, the ADL, the National Hispanic Media Coalition, and others. Not just that, but also being the first organization to call for the civil rights audit and all of the things the civil rights audit laid out. We have seen so much attention and push from advocacy organizations, and have watched Facebook sometimes make some changes, sometimes not, sometimes make changes and not enforce those changes. And all of that really, for me, leads us to a deep recognition that we're going to need rules from government. The technology that has so much potential to bring us into the future is currently dragging us into the past. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to end up with just more and more of this sort of out of control impact that we're experiencing. And so as we sort of look a Democratic majority in the Congress. The sort of Biden-Harris administration. I've personally talked with Vice President Harris about these issues. You're someone that's had to go up against Facebook and has had to deal with the gaslighting, has had to deal with the PR. What advice would you give to our elected officials who are going to have to go up against this platform in a different arena, but no less important? And in some ways, the importance of what they can potentially do could have sweeping impacts if they go in with the right information and they go in with the right sort of theory of the case.
Yes, and first I want to congratulate Color of Change and organizations like the NAACP, Congressional Black Caucus, who are holding Facebook accountable. I don't think would have gotten as far as we've gotten with Facebook and similar tech companies had it not been for the work of the organization. So, like I say, congratulations on that so far. I think having myself testified in front of Congress regarding tech and had behind the scenes meetings with some people on the Hill, is that what's missing is a fundamental education of how tech works behind the scenes, not just what Facebook is telling you. And I think a lot of times what happens is that people get distracted by the diversity numbers. That's an easy number to say, oh yeah, we're working on it. We've gone up from 4% Black people to 5% Black people, and they get to say that they're working on it. But asking for actual results, asking for numbers like retention numbers, which are drastically terrible in terms of retaining employees. And as I've shared, employees are the key to making some of these internal changes. What we've seen is that conservatives have received a lot of attention from Facebook because they are the loudest in the room. They are using, and I mean conservative politicians, that they are using the media to their advantage. They are, even if some of the cries of censorship and having their posts taken down and things like that aren't always exactly accurate. But we've seen that executives from Facebook have cozied up to them for that reason. And so with Democrats in the majority, it's going to be important for the left to be as vocal with these companies, to know what they're asking for before Facebook steps into the room. And I watch all the hearings whenever the tech executives are on the Hill, and these are questions that a quick Google search in many cases could answer, to go beyond that. And I'd say the biggest piece of advice: listen to those staffers that are sitting behind them, who are handing them the papers and the data, because they know more than anyone what is happening on the ground. And that can be a huge step forward in terms of making change.
I could continue to talk to you for probably another hour about all of this stuff. And then after that, I'd probably sort of need to take a nap or get some therapy or something.
Oh, man.
These problems are just so large. I want to thank you, Mark. I know the risk you took in speaking out and adding your voice to a chorus of people, but your unique perspective to it. It is part of a legacy of Black people that have put themselves on the line in order to fight for real change. And we don't get to that real change without individuals being part of that case. We need individuals, we need institutions, we need ideas, and then we need power behind all of that. And that's why, I'm so proud that we're continuing in this relationship to build and to put that power behind what can be possible. As the tides change in DC, as the cultural narrative changes around Facebook and big tech, there's an opportunity to make real change. And that opportunity is only going to be seized if more of us work together, and that we see all of the ways in which big tech undergirds so many of the ways in which we get to experience the world and we get to experience opportunity. Our democracy and our economy rely on us getting it right, and our ability to have mobility inside of it is going to be fundamental to all of that. And so, good luck as you continue on, Mark. I know we will continue to be in touch on the road ahead. And for all of you who are watching, you can visit us at colorofchange.org. There's going to be information on this link and below me on this video on ways that you can get involved, raise your voice, and make real change happen as it relates to big tech. The work ahead is going to require it. And I fundamentally believe that racial justice will be a driver in us winning the day and winning real change. Until next time, see you soon.